Welcome to the Life's Best Medicine podcast, where we are finding hope and healing one episode at a time. No appointment needed, no rubber gloves, and no coping. Just a healthy dose of life lessons to help equip you for this wild journey we call life. Hello, everyone. I'm doing something I really dislike doing. I hate to do a disclaimer before my podcast. I think my audience is smart enough to think for themselves and to understand that I'm not giving medical advice that would not be appropriate on a podcast. What I do want to do is raise questions. My job as a physician is to raise questions and to look at hypotheses and to see what I'm seeing clinically and to make judgments based on that. Sometimes, as we know, we've had tons of drugs over the years that we were told were the best drugs on ever invented, and then they turned out to kill people. But based on the evidence we had at the time, that's what we were told. My guest today is Bryan Ardis. He lost a family member early on, and the way he feels is that the medical system killed his father-in-law. I don't know if that's true or not true. I'm not a hospitalist. I want to make that clear. I do not treat people in the hospital. I'm an outpatient physician. I have a lot of friends and colleagues who are hospitalists, and I try to talk to them, and I try to keep an open mind and try to understand treatment protocols and what they're doing in the hospital, because ultimately, even though I'm not a hospital doctor, my patients are going to end up in the hospital. So I think it's important that we don't just toe the party line, that we question. And that's how science works. We have a hypothesis, and really what we're supposed to do is try to prove that wrong. And unfortunately, I think a lot of times doctors just don't want to question it, and we just do what we're told and we follow the party line, even if it's at the cost of our patients. So this episode, I really don't like to get into these deep subjects. We talk about a lot of things. This is a great interview. I learned a lot myself, and there's stuff that I don't know. I'm not an expert in this area, so I can look at it and I can take it with a grain of salt. But I do know that I have to research and I look up things, and I sometimes it's hard to find data and information that's accurate. But I think my listeners really appreciate that I may not be right all the time. I'm just giving my opinion, and my guest is giving his opinion. So I hope you could take that with a grain of salt. If that's too much for you, and you don't like to use deductive reasoning, and you don't want to research and look to see if what's being said is true, then I would suggest don't listen. Because if your mind's made up, this will probably frustrate you. But I will tell you, there's a lot of topics in this conversation that are very intriguing to me, and things that I can't verify. But I'm just telling the truth of what my life experience is, and I think Dr. Ardis is doing the same. So I just want to give that as a preamble. Of course, I'm not having this sponsored, other than my Patreon supporters who've been great and have been very supportive. And I hope that you gain something. I know people will, and it will at least make you think. That's the important thing, is to be able to think and to assess and sit back and look and see if what you're seeing, what you're hearing align with your common sense. And I think this is something we really have to look at in our society right now. We really have to be able to say, I'm going to do the right thing. I don't want to just fly under the radar. I don't want to fight with medical boards and other doctors, but this is the way I see it. And since this is my podcast, I guess I can present what I think is important. Before the discussion, we don't know which direction it's going to go, so we went a lot of crazy directions. But I think I'm a better doctor, and I've learned a great deal personally and ethically. So I'm hoping that we can continue this journey together. And again, this is a controversial episode. I guarantee you that. I know it just from the topics that we discussed, but I think it's extremely valuable. So thank you for your continued support. Thank you for listening. And sometimes life's best medicine is stepping outside of your comfort zone and thinking and observing. So thank you. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hello and welcome back to the Life's Best Medicine podcast. I don't get very excited. You know me, I don't get too excited and jump up and down, but this one really excited me. This is a guy I've been kind of following, a doc who's out there with way more careers than most people that I come across. Dr. Bryan Ardis, thank you so much for joining me. You love your podcast and what you're doing, and really just having the courage to step up in a time right now where it's like really, really scary and dangerous.
It really is. Well, Doc, it's great to be on your show, and I appreciate you wanting to be a voice for the people who respect you, honor you, trust you. There has to be somebody or some individuals who stand up in this period of crisis where there's so much lies and deceit and mistreatment of human life and disrespect for human life. And
yeah, tell people your story personally. What drew you into this?
Yeah, so if those of you who don't know my story, in February of 2020, the very first week of February in 2020, before COVID came to Texas, my father-in-law walked into a hospital in Dallas, Texas, with complaints of fever and a headache. And when he walked himself into the hospital, they diagnosed him with the flu on day 1. Day 2, they called us to say he now had pneumonia. Day 3, they called us to say he was going into acute kidney failure. Day 5 called us to say he was now unconscious and being put on forced air. And that's when I went up to the hospital for the first time. And the reason why we didn't go up before that is my wife's mother fell 3 days before my father-in-law went into the hospital, diagnosed with the flu. She fell and broke several vertebrae in her neck and was at a rehab center. So the rehab center had asked me and my wife, Jane, to stay with their mother and send some other family member to be with the dad at a hospital where he might have the flu, because they were worried about us being exposed to the flu and bringing it back to the rehab center where elderly people would be. So we sent her sister, Jane's sister, to go be with her dad for those 5 days. And I was just getting antsy every day, right? Like, this guy is really deteriorating from just having the flu and complaints of a headache. So on the evening of the 5th is when my wife and I went up there for the first time. And when I walked into the room, I couldn't believe what I saw. When I walked in, he's unconscious. He's put on 20 pounds of water weight in his abdomen. You can just see his abdomen swollen like a waterbed and a water balloon. And on the IV stand is a bag of what's called vancomycin, which is an antibiotic. And I remember looking at that bag and knowing, just from clinical experience, that vancomycin causes acute kidney failure. And a lot of people you give that to. And it's an antibiotic going into my father-in-law's veins for a virus he had been diagnosed with, which is what all I was told. So I demanded the nurses tell me when the doctors were going to be in the next morning. They said 9 a.m. I was there at 8 waiting, and only to find out when that doctor walked in the room. I had him take me through all the medical history that's on the computer in the room with my wife standing there while my father-in-law's unconscious in the bed. Went through the first day's test. He didn't actually test positive for the flu, either A or B, influenza. He didn't test positive for viral or bacterial pneumonia, nor did he test positive for any pathogen, any kind of bug that he could be infected with. So I asked him, why'd you diagnose him with the flu? And they said, we believed it was a false negative. And I said, well, even if it is a false negative, why did you put him on vancomycin, or how long has he been on that? I pointed at the IV bag, and he said, oh, he's been on that since day 1. And I said, why would you give him that? And he goes, well, doc, it's a part of a hospital protocol for the flu. And it's not only that drug, he's on 3 different antibiotics since day 1. And I said, you better get him off of vancomycin. You know that drug causes acute kidney failure. And he immediately said, I can meet with the administrators here in a little bit. We can have a meeting. We can collaborate and make that decision together. And I said, no, you're going to take him off of that right now, because you know that causes acute kidney failure. I want to see his pneumonia diagnosis, because on day 1, he didn't test positive for viral or bacterial pneumonia. But on day 2, you called us and said he was now having pneumonia. How do you know he had pneumonia? And they said, we just took a chest x-ray. And I said, well, pull it up. And he pulls it up and he points at the lower lobes of each lung. And he says, there's the pneumonia right there. And I said, where? And he goes, right there. And I said, that's not pneumonia. That's pulmonary edema. That is a fine line of water in the base of his lungs. Pneumonia looks like cauliflower blotches all throughout the lung fields. I said, that's not pneumonia. That's pulmonary edema. That's water in his lungs from you causing acute kidney failure beginning when he walked in here and you started pumping vancomycin into him. That's what vancomycin does. And I said, so get him off of that. And what is his urinary output? I want to know, how much urine is he excreting every day? And he goes, yeah, we're measuring that every day, only to find out for the last 3 days, there was no measurement that he was in there. This is on day 6. And I said, why don't you have any measurements? And they said they couldn't get the catheter to stay on, or the bag to stay on. It would just fall off and leak all over the place. And I said, well, show me his Lasix schedule, which is a diuretic that helps an individual urinate, because I could just see he was a very thin man when he went in. Now he's got this huge belly of water that felt like a water bed, if you've ever felt a water bed. It was just tons of water accumulating in his body by then. So he says, I'll show you the medication schedule. So we go from day 1. And on day 1, there was 0 Lasix to his surprise. Day 2, 0 Lasix to his surprise. Day 3, there was 20 milligrams, which is a very small dose. And then day 4, 0 Lasix. Day 5, the day before, 0 Lasix. Now I'm there on day 6, 0 Lasix. And I said, you better go get him on Lasix right now. You just lied to me. And this is the attending doctor that's seen him now for 6 days, was totally unaware that he'd only been given Lasix one time on day 3. And he was just sitting here accumulating more water. So they went, actually, he ran out to the nurse's station, brought in Lasix. They put him on Lasix for 4 hours in an IV. And over the 4 hours, he actually lost 15 to 20 pounds of water. And he came off the forced air because all of his pneumonia symptoms cleared up. The respiratory therapist came in, listened to all of his lung fields, and he said for the first time, unsolicited, he looks at us as he's listening to my father-in-law's lungs, and he goes, this is the first day in 5 days he has 0 gurgling sounds, 0 crackling going on in his lungs. His lungs are completely clear. I think I can turn the forced air off and just supply oxygen to him. I think he can breathe on his own. So they did. And sure enough, he breathes completely on his own. He actually becomes conscious that same evening. He's starting to become more aware, which is great. And 4 hours after we went home and all of this was settled, I got them to commit to keep him in on Lasix every day. And I was going to be up there every day and manage and oversee his care. That same night that we left, that he became conscious, was able to breathe on his own, all his pneumonia supposedly cleared up, the doctors called us that night to tell us that they were permanently banning the use of Lasix for the rest of his treatment in that hospital, and they were putting him back on vancomycin. And
what were they basing that on?
They said they were going back to the hospital protocol because this is what they said. He's in acute kidney failure. We're not going to add a drug like Lasix that can worsen the acute kidney failure. That was the reasoning, which is unjustified for me because when we gave it to him, he actually got better. So if you want to know what the term practicing medicine looks like, this is what it looks like. So you change the protocol, he improves. Why do you change it back to the previous demoralizing protocol? And I looked at my wife and I said, just so you know, when he hung up the phone, I said, just so you know, they're covering up their liability. The hospital administrators know I just exposed that the protocol that they were using for 5 days now, 6 days, was causing the deterioration of his body. I made them switch the protocol. He started improving. The administrators saw that as a threat. They told the doctors to go back to the original protocol, and that's what they're doing. I flew up there to the hospital the next morning only to be escorted out by security. They would no longer talk to me, said they would only talk to my wife's family. And this is where it all began. I told my wife's family in front of the doctors there, they're kicking me out because they know I exposed their liability of causing harm to their father-in-law. And over the next 48 hours, they will murder him to seal the deal. This is what they're going to do. They're going to cover it up and they're going to murder him. They're going to tell you it's palliative care they're going to offer you in about 48 hours, which is a morphine drip. It's going to paralyze his diaphragm and his heart, and he's going to die as a result of the drug, but they're going to call it palliative care just to get rid of him and get us out of the hospital. You watch. Sure enough, that's what they did. It only took 9 days for them to murder my father-in-law. I was furious. They did everything I said that they were going to do. They didn't do anything that I asked them to do. They just didn't care about our rights in the hospital as patients or families and of the suffering individual. 3 months later, after being a witness to this traumatic event, and Doc, this was the most traumatic thing that I've ever experienced in my whole life, was the day he died in that hospital. When they murdered him in front of my family, I lost it. I actually was up against a wall shaking. I could not believe what this family was allowing these medical doctors to do. I was totally aware of what was going on, and it was shocking. 3 months later, I hadn't even left the house for 3 months. I didn't do anything for 3 months, nothing. I just stayed at home and plotted my revenge. And I'm not kidding. If you see my red hair, I was plotting my revenge to the hospital. I was actually outlining for weeks the entire 9-day death protocol and everything they did in that hospital. And I was outlining it for my lawyers to go sue this hospital. That's all I spent. It was just a whole 3 months of revenge. And then
were you able to grieve, or were you just filled with revenge?
No, not then. I was actually not grieving at all. I was just furious.
Yeah. Because you watch it happen, and when you're predicting here's what's coming, because, a lot of us have said that. It's kind of like, it's like, 2 weeks to flatten the curve. It's the same thing. It's like we see someone come into the ICU, they had a big stroke. Then they say, okay, guys, look, we're going to put him on the ventilator because he can't breathe for himself. And then they're on the ventilator. And then they don't tell you, well, in a few days, then we're going to say we have to do a trach tube They're like, well, we've already done this. So essentially we've done so far. Now we're gonna put the feeding tube in. Now you got someone with no brain function with it. And then it's months down the road that they're gonna keep them in the ICU. And you know that day one what's gonna happen to this person, right? So being honest and saying, look, here's the hard decisions you're gonna have to make if things don't turn around. And it's so hard from a patient, especially when doctors don't want to listen to the patient or their family, and they just say, look, this is what we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, it was awful. So I actually was sitting, and I loved this because I was in Colorado Springs being filmed in a documentary, and Christiana Northrup is sitting next to me, who I admire and love. I just think she's a beautiful soul. So she's sitting right next to me, and the documentary filmmaker comes up to us and asks, why did we get involved in this? Like, why did we get involved in this movement? Why did we start speaking out? And there was multiple docs there and an attorney named Thomas Renz. and both of them, this doctor next to me on the left and Thomas Renz, both say, I did this because I didn't want the world the way it was headed with COVID, with the lockdowns, the losses of liberties and freedoms. They didn't want that world they could foresee was going to be what their children were going to be left with. So they were trying to save the world from being demoralized and destroyed for their children and grandchildren. And they kept talking about the kids. And I was just sitting there looking at the fire. There was a fire pit in front of us. And I said, I really appreciate all of you guys' talk about your children. And I love that you have that perspective. I said, but that isn't why I got involved in this. I said, mine's purely vengeance. And Christiana Northrup lost it laughing. And she's like, that is so great, Dr. Ardis. She's like, that is so great. You know, in the New Testament and in the Bible, it says there's a very valid reason at times for righteous anger. And I said, you can call it righteous anger if you want to. I was just furious. I said, and they killed my father-in-law. They kicked me out of a hospital. And then they wanted to, 3 months later is when I learned that Anthony Fauci is setting up a protocol with an experimental antiviral drug called Remdesivir for all hospitalized COVID-19 patients in America. And at this point, when I read the memo, the only reason why I read it, even went looking at NIH.gov's website in May of 2020, was I was getting alerts on my phone from Apple News. It would just pop up on my screen and it would say, today marks another record death total for the entire world. United States has more deaths in one day than any other country worldwide during the pandemic. And I just need to ask you, Doc, you understand this. My viewpoint, just looking at these little alerts on my phone, I was like, why? If there is a ravaging, super deadly virus going around the world, why in the world would there be more dying Americans than any other citizens of any other country if the virus is a threat worldwide? Why? We're supposedly in this great healthcare system of America. I'm just going to give you my perspective. The way I see America, so proud of their healthcare system, I think America should have been expecting that the entire world would have been flooding here illegally trying to get treatment for COVID-19 because they don't have the healthcare that we do in this country. But how it looks even now, we're in January of 2021. We have over 850,000 dead Americans from COVID-19, supposedly. COVID-19, America does. We're the only country that has over 700,000 dead from COVID-19. No other country even has 700,000. How is it possible that 2 years later, America still sucks the most at taking care of sick COVID patients? Well, it's not really that they suck at taking care of COVID-19 patients. Our actual federal health agencies, led by one guy named Dr. Anthony Fauci, decided to take the reins, or was given the reins, to be able to manage and set up the one and only protocol for treating all COVID sick Americans for 2020. And the reason why we still have the highest death totals for COVID-19 is that they're all lying to you. All the health agencies are lying to you. The CDC is lying to you. The NIH is lying to you. The FDA is absolutely lying to you. But the NIH and Anthony Fauci selected a drug in May of 2020 is what I learned. The reason why so many people were dying in March and April of 2020 in the city of New York, which is where the epicenter started, when this whole protocol was put in place, every single one of those New York citizens was actually being put in an ICU behind a closed door with a piece of paper taped to the door that said clinical trial in place, research study, Remdesivir drug. Remdesivir was a drug being pumped into all of New York people being diagnosed with COVID-19 with a ridiculous PCR test, which I didn't know about much at the time. But this remdesivir drug is the #1 cause for the majority of all deaths for COVID-19. I'm going to say it right now, worldwide now. But in May 2020, Anthony Fauci had said, we're going to use this one and only drug, remdesivir. He said it was proven safe and effective in the Ebola trial in Africa a year earlier before the pandemic. He also said it was proven safe and effective against the COVID-19 SARS-CoV-2 virus in a trial in March of 2020. And I just happened to be home being furious and vengeful, not working because I sold my practice a year earlier. And I just decided to read those research studies. I actually love research studies. I didn't realize when I was a kid, I didn't want to be the nerd, but I loved encyclopedias. I loved research studies for some weird reason, but I didn't want to be the nerd. So I used to say it all the time. I'm a cool nerd. I like to play basketball and I like to read. It's great. That's all I do. So that's all I did, basketball and reading. And so I just clicked these 2 research studies. I've been reading research studies for years. And I clicked the first one. I wanted to know, what did Anthony Fauci know about this remdesivir drug that I had never heard of? What did he know that I didn't? But he was only quoting 2 studies. So I clicked the Ebola trial document. And to my shock, I couldn't believe what I was reading. This actual study was 4 different experimental drugs in Africa. One was called remdesivir, one was called ZMapp, one was called MAB114, and another one was called Regeneron, which I know you've heard of and some of your audience has too. All right, so remdesivir was the only considered antiviral in the actual trial. The other 3 are called monoclonal antibodies. You ever heard of those? Yeah, you've heard of them. All right.
When we can get them.
Yeah, so you've got remdesivir and 3 different experimental monoclonal antibodies in this trial in Africa a year before the pandemic. And what was found was the safety board for this research experimental drug trial, the safety board halfway through the 1-year-long study found that remdesivir was the only drug that killed over half the people they gave it to. So the other drugs were close. ZMapp had a death percentage mortality rate of 49.7. That's pretty close to 50% of everybody who gave that drug to died. But remdesivir was the only one at 53%. So the safety board pulled remdesivir and pulled ZMapp from the study on August 9th, 2019. They pulled it from the study, these 2 drugs, and said no one else in Africa can get these 2 drugs. We're only going to use MAB114 and Regeneron. That study publishes in December of 2019. Anthony Fauci in May of 2020, just 5 months later, says that drug, remdesivir, was found to be effective and safe against the Ebola virus in Africa. Really, the safety board said it was the least safe, the least effective drug in the whole trial. Why is Anthony Fauci saying this? And I remember sitting there looking at the computer, Doc, and I went just like this. Anthony Fauci's a liar, or someone's lying to him. I want to know who funded this study, because maybe he was just giving bad advice. Oh my God, there's only one person who funded the whole study. Anthony Fauci and his NIAID department. He's the only one that funded the entire study in Africa, which means he would have had all of this data for a whole 1.5 years before he would have mandated remdesivir. So then I knew he was a liar and he selected a drug to create mass murder. And then I wanted to know, how's the drug going to kill people? The only other study he quoted was a study in March of 2020 with 53 COVID-19 patients. And this actual study was done by Gilead, the maker of remdesivir. Now, remember, I'm just angry right now that the hospital killed my father-in-law. Everything I read was making me more angry. Everything was making me more angry. When I read the Gilead study, which both of these studies for all of your audience are still published on the New England Journal of Medicine, so just go look at them. And anybody willfully ignorant who doesn't want to go look, I'm sorry. I tried to warn you. I tried to give you the evidence.
Well, and I'll tell you, I saw you. I'm like, who is this Ardis guy, or where did he come from? I never saw you, but I saw you in an interview with Reiner Fuelmick, who I think is probably going to be the richest guy in the world at some point. But you were talking about this. I'm like, oh, this guy's full of it. I'm going to look it up myself. Like, I'll look it up. How come I haven't looked it up before? We haven't. So I think looking at these studies, and when you start researching it yourself, and that's why when people talk about something that's controversial, my job is to look it up and say, is this guy crazy or is he right? Right. And I think that's when you start looking at the studies, you scratch your head and think, what happened? How do we end up here?
Yeah, that second study, which I went through with Dr. Reiner Fuelmick also, the second study from Gilead, what was making it worse was they gave 10 days of remdesivir to 53 COVID-19 patients in March of 2020. And this is what they published. Gilead actually published this. Their conclusions were 31% of everyone they gave the drug to between days 5 and 10 developed multiple organ failure, acute kidney failure, septic shock, and hypotension. Several of them had to have acute kidney transplants because the drug destroyed their kidneys that fast. And then I realized right away, this is why so many people were dying in New York. And the reason why this made so much sense was in the media in March and April, every doctor in New York on press conferences were saying, we've never seen a respiratory virus do this before. When we start treating this new COVID-19 virus, the virus goes from the lungs and starts attacking the kidneys. And on day 3, 4, and 5, we're seeing severe acute kidney failure. And the doctors and the administrators of hospitals were pleading to the media. We not only have shortages of respiratory or ventilators to breathe, we don't have enough dialysis machines for the kidney failure. And all of a sudden it made sense. These doctors really had no idea that the remdesivir drug they were being told to pump into the veins of all these people was causing acute kidney failure, proven to do so in 5 to 10 days.
Have they looked at mortality rates? Because I'm not a hospitalist, I'm an outpatient doc. Have they looked at comparisons to hospitals who did not use this protocol, who didn't have access to it, like out in the sticks somewhere, and what their mortality rate was in comparison?
I don't know if they've seen those at all. I haven't seen any of those. And I'm sure the federal government's not going to actually produce those. What we did do with Thomas Renz here in the United States, we got him to get some people at Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services to do CMS data pools from different states. And we started with New York. I wanted to know, people in the ages of 65 years and older in New York, how many of them died after 5 days of remdesivir treatment? That's all I want to know. What's the percentage of those that died? Do you know what the percentage is? We got the numbers.
I know it's high, but I don't recall the exact numbers.
It's 26.9% of all of them died. Now, what's phenomenal about that number, we just got those numbers in September of 2020.
And CMS, for people like CMS, that's actual reporting. This isn't like, taking an estimate. This is actual reporting. Oh,
CMS is Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. Doctors are not allowed to lie and update the records for CMS and every patient on Medicare. That's fraudulent. Every doctor would end up in prison if they were actually giving false data or review or reporting to the actual CMS. It is totally different than VAERS.
As with the VAERS also. That would be false document. That would be a felony, correct?
Well, VAERS is actually voluntary. Anybody can publish anything.
But if you publish something, if you put something on VAERS that isn't accurate and they come after you, that's a federal crime.
I would like to see them try to do that, but I haven't seen that. But CMS, for sure, we know as an insurance company, yes, you would go to jail and prison for insurance fraud, Medicare fraud. But VAERS, I'm not sure. They could probably do that, but I haven't ever heard of that happening. There's less than 1% of all actual accidental or injuries from vaccines being reported to VAERS, so it's not very accurate anyway. But when I hear all these doctors
and the latest data is over 1 million injuries and
it's horrific.
Horrific.
So the data is 26.9% of all Medicare age patients have actually died after 5 days of remdesivir in hospitals. Now, what's interesting about that number is we got that finalized, those numbers and data points in September of 2021. I said since May of 2020, just from the Gilead study, who makes remdesivir in March of 2020, I continue to say in the media, upwards of 30% of all people treated with remdesivir for 5 to 10 days will die as a result of kidney failure, pulmonary edema, which is flooding their lungs with water that they're going to call secondary COVID pneumonia, just like they did my father-in-law. It wasn't pneumonia. It was actually flooding their lungs with water, calling it pneumonia when it was pulmonary edema. And you will see
the vancomycin, which we've seen be disastrous too, and we see people declining. So we say, let's double the dose. Let's really cure them.
Yeah. So that's what got me upset. So I immediately, this is not a joke, I was retired. I was just producing products for nutritional companies I had established.
Yeah, tell people your background so they understand, like what you've done clinically and what your expertise has been in.
Yeah, so I had a sister actually that was diagnosed when she was 11 with systemic lupus erythematosus. I'm the oldest of 5 kids. I was 21 years old. This was in the late 90s. And there wasn't a lot of information about lupus. It was very rare in children to have lupus, but that was the diagnosis. And the doctors at the 3rd hospital in Dallas, Texas, for a month stint, of them trying to figure out what was wrong with her and why every joint in her entire body hurt, the Scottish Rites Hospital in Dallas finally diagnosed her with systemic lupus erythematosus and told my parents, there is no known cause for lupus. We don't know what causes it. There's no known cure for lupus. There's just these 3 drug treatments she's going to have to be on for the rest of her life to help manage her symptoms, which was called prednisone, methotrexate, and Plaquenil. Now, Plaquenil is pretty cool because that's actually HCQ, which we hear a lot about hydroxychloroquine around the world in the last 2 years, thanks to Donald Trump and Zev Zelenko and others. But hydroxychloroquine has been used for decades. So she was diagnosed with this condition. The doctors also told my parents then that the drugs that she was going to have to live on for the rest of her life, because the medical profession didn't know the cause for her condition or what was causing lupus or how to fix it. They were just going to treat it. That the drugs over time were going to destroy her liver and kidneys, and she would not most likely live into her 40s. This is what they told my parents was her prognosis the day they got the diagnosis. And then they said she'll never have children either because one of these drugs has a side effect of stillbirths and birth defects, so she'll never be able to have her own children. And I remember listening to my parents and this doctor, they started crying. And my parents heard something I didn't hear. My parents literally heard, as this doctor was talking, that my sister had a terminal illness. And I looked at my parents and I was like, they didn't say she had a terminal illness. They never even said anything about the disease causing her to die. They said, we don't know what causes lupus. We don't know how to fix it. The drugs we're going to give her are going to kill her. That's what they said. I mean, that's what they said. How did you get from that? She has a terminal illness. The lupus isn't going to kill her. They just said the lupus isn't going to kill her. They said the drugs over time would, only because they don't know what's wrong with her. And I actually, at that moment, said, I am not going to let this profession kill my sister because they don't know what's wrong with her. This is what I said. They just made up a name. They don't know what causes it. I just want to know what made her start hurting 6 months ago. And I told my parents then, for the first 10 years of her life, she had 0 symptoms. 6 months ago, she started having pain all over her body. Something happened to her. I would like to know what that is. And so I said, if this profession doesn't know what's wrong with her, I'll go figure out what's wrong with her. So I actually set out to become a medical doctor, but I wanted to get into research, only to find out that at the University of Utah's research department and at their med school, they actually only get paid by drug companies to pump the drugs, experimental drugs, into animals to determine what's the weight ratio that's going to kill the animal so we can determine human clinical trial dosages. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't want to do this. These drugs aren't even the fix for my sister anyway. The drugs were never going to be the fix for my sister. So I actually left there, went to chiropractic school, acupuncture school, became a clinical nutritionist, went around to 8 different states, visiting different functional medical doctors to try to find out, how do you actually analyze the cause of disease? Someone's got to be looking for that, don't they? I don't know. I was raised in a very medically minded.
We forgot the whole thing about root cause. That's why the engineers come in, different people from different areas. And because in medicine, we're told one thing. They say, you give this drug and this is what, that's it. And you do it. And you go, okay. And you tell the next guy, this is what you do, right? This is how it is. And it just gets passed along. And no one says, well, we should look at the original data and see what that study looked like, right? So when you have a situation like that, you're forced to think differently outside the box, right? And so that's what you did.
Yep. So that's what I did. So I had to just go learn everywhere. I realized chiropractic wasn't going to fix my sister. I'd adjusted her many times. I didn't do it. Acupuncture did not reverse her lupus. It wasn't doing that. But what I did find was a technique that allowed me, and a lot of doctors taught me ways to analyze for underlying causes of toxicities and infections. And you already mentioned it even before we started recording this show that you wanted to talk about parasites.
Oh yeah, I'm not gonna let you escape without that, man. That's why I got the free consult with you, man.
So we'll talk about parasites.
Yeah, we're not gonna let that go. Yes.
There's a lot of causes for autoimmune diseases, neurological diseases in this country, GI issues and digestive disorders that are linked to things that I think and believe are personally being withheld from medical schools. Because if you presented that information to the medical doctors as they're training and being educated, they would look for those causes of those diseases because they got into wanting to be a medical doctor, most of them, to actually help people. So if you want to ultimately help people, it would be relieving them of their symptoms. Wouldn't that be miraculous? And helping them solve the problems for why they're sick. That would be brilliant. So I actually set up a practice in 2004 in Maryville, Tennessee, right outside the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Had my own practice for 5 years, sold it in 2009. It was very successful. I loved it. But during that 5 years is where I was using chiropractic, acupuncture, and then using nutrition and these techniques I was learning from doctors around the country on how to analyze for illness and causes of diseases. And then I got the impression one night standing in my home, I actually had a audible voice behind my head while I'm standing in the home I loved in the Smoky Mountains that I love and always wanted to live in. I had this literal audible voice say behind me, "Get your family to Dallas."
Wow.
And I remember looking behind me and I was like, I don't want to be in Dallas. That's where I went to chiropractic school. I didn't love Dallas. I didn't want to go back there. I came to the Smoky Mountains because I wanted to be there in Tennessee. But the impression was it was audible. I knew it. And
When you're called, you're called. You can't, you're like, okay, I'm
so I went and knelt down by my bed. We'll talk about faith for a minute. I went and knelt down by my bed and wanted to know if this is true. And man, I was just overwhelmed with this impression. My whole body, I started crying. I think it was because I was depressed. I didn't want to go, but I was very moved too by the inclination. So I put the house on the market. The house had not sold. This was in 2009. Remember what happened in 2008 and 9?
Yeah, I know. I bought my house right before the market crashed. Yeah, I know all about that.
Yeah, so
I was underwater for a long time.
Yeah, 3 years. There was no house sold in my neighborhood. It was a very upscale neighborhood. No one had sold a home in 3 years in the neighborhood. I put my house on the market. 2 days later, this family from North Carolina called and said, we want to give you full asking price. We have to give it in cash and you have to be out in 2 weeks. And I was like, oh my gosh, I guess this is real. So anyway, I moved my family to Dallas, kept flying back and forth weekly so I could see my patients. After over a year, I trained a doctor. She bought the practice and then I moved to Dallas. And then I set up a practice in Frisco, Texas at the end of 2009. And between 2009 and 2010, we served 15,000 patients from 16 different countries. And it was just my little practice. And people were flying in from around the world. We had done a great job of learning and explaining how the human body works and then coaching patients through how to heal them nutritionally, homeopathically, chiropractically, you name it, energetically, and emotionally. There's a lot more to life. And I'll just say this right now. I have a great respect for what the medical profession can do for people. But I do have this realization that 99% of all of our diseases in the world are not caused by a deficiency in a pharmaceutical drug. When you're being told that you have a symptom or a disease and you need to live on this drug for the rest of your life and you have to take this every day, in my head, what the doctor's actually doing is looking at you and going, all you need to do is take this for the rest of your life. This is why you're sick. And the reality is you were never sick because you were deficient in a drug. However, 100% of all people do develop symptoms and diseases when they're minerally and vitamin deficient or nutritionally deficient in any way. You'll always develop symptoms around that. So to me, the reality is drugs are not the fix. They can be used short-term to manage symptoms while you figure out what's actually wrong with the person. That's the brilliant model of medicine and how it should be used.
Well, and part of the problem is this: the doctors now, because I was in standard practice for 18 years and switched over to doing what I'm doing now, focusing on metabolic health, nutrition, lifestyle, all those things. Because when you're in the insurance model, you only have 8 minutes, 12 minutes with a patient. How much can you really instill in them and say, okay, let me explain to you about parasites. Let me explain to you about the effect of stress. Like you're just saying, okay, here, you have high blood pressure. Here you go. And so I saw that and thought, but the problem I saw was about probably maybe 80% of the people don't really care. They're like, look, I'm not giving up my processed food. I'm not giving up my alcohol, my smoking and all this stuff. Give me a pill so I could keep doing that. Like absolve me of my sins. Give me an exception to the rule type thing. But the 20% that really want help and you can invest in them, you can really make a huge life change, right?
Absolutely. Yep. You're very right. So yeah, so for me, it's never been true that a drug that you need to take for the rest of your life is the cause for your disease symptoms of any kind. So I set out on a mission to try to help people uncover the root cause for why it is they developed high blood pressure, congestive heart failure, autoimmune diseases of all kind. And we got very good at it.
Eczema, asthma, depression, anxiety, all these things.
Yeah. So now the truth is all of that is not within the scope of practice of chiropractic. You're only supposed to be analyzing musculoskeletal conditions, but I was fascinated.
But is it nutrition and lifestyle in the scope?
You can do that. You just can't diagnose diseases. Like I couldn't say you have Alzheimer's because you have aluminum toxicity in your brain from your flu shots. I can't say that. That's not my job. A medical doctor could say that. A neurologist could say that. I can't say that. So all I would say as a chiropractor would be this. I would say this. You actually have aluminum toxicity in the brain. That is not a medical diagnosis. It's not like I gave you a disease title. I just told you what you have in your body. I'll let the medical profession give you the diagnosis if you want, or the name of what that is. But if we can actually detox that out of you and improve the amount of aluminum toxicity, the neurological function will improve. Your dementia will improve. Your stability will improve. It's going to be phenomenal. So anyway, that's what we got good at doing. So I've had to educate people outside of how medically we are conditioned to think, which is outside of you need to vaccinate everything, drug everything. That's just not how I view health. So
yeah, and it's hard because that's the training and that's where the money is. And you do grand rounds sponsored by Pfizer, sponsored by Moderna, sponsored by whoever. And so the doctors are so pigeonholed. And I'm telling you this because I was one of those guys. I mean, I always realized, look, we're missing out on life stress. I mean, you could sit there, this old doc, when I first started training, he would sit there and just BS with people for 10 minutes. And I go, this guy's not doing anything. He said, well, did you know their mental function is normal? This is normal. They're walking at their gait. And so like my chiropractor, Dr. Grant, Jean Grant, love you. She adjusted me last night. I was gimping yesterday. So I'm standing here the whole time talking to you now, thanks to her and her skill set and her love of people. And she just loves what she does. Anyways, that's a little commercial for my friend, but she's been a huge supporter. But I think with these things, we have to really learn, like, okay, for me as a Western doc, I would see people with back pain. Like, okay, here's some prednisone. Here's this. If it's a structural problem, I could decrease the inflammation until I find the root cause. You have inflammation there for a reason. Your body's protecting itself. The body wants to heal and wants to survive. So you say, okay, you're out of alignment. Let's fix that. Okay, headaches, migraines, TMJ, all these things. I've seen chiropractic work and acupuncture. I've seen all these things that I don't understand all this stuff, but if it works, it works. And I'm happy. I want my patient healthy.
Yep. So what I did in practice for 20 years was this. There was 8 things that I learned to look for with every patient that could cause your symptoms that would be in the medical profession then defined as a disease, right? So a disease is just a collection of symptoms. They give you a name. All right. So what I looked for was, these are the 8 things that became true for me that I learned over these 20 years of practice. And that was, you can truly have a food allergy or sensitivity to a food. You can have metal toxicities like lead, cadmium, mercury, aluminum, you name it, all kinds of things, barium, you can have all kinds of stuff. You can also have toxicities from chemicals like medications or drugs, or it's all kinds of stuff. Fertilizers, herbicides, you could have Roundup poisoning in your brain. Study Stephanie Seneff's work, Toxic Legacy, read her book, it's phenomenal. Chemicals can cause symptoms and disease. And then number 4 is infections, like bacteria, viruses, funguses, parasites. We know these cause disease, so that you have to go look for those. And then emotional trauma. There's a direct psychosomatic effect. You have the brain, your mind, your emotions can directly trigger symptoms inside the body that you're going to have, and disease states. And then you have misalignments in the spine that are a chiropractic issue, or structurally anywhere in the body. You can have a misalignment that actually does cause stress, dysfunction, and disease of organs in the body. Which is miraculous to relieve and very easy. So that's 6. And then 7 is mineral and vitamin deficiencies, right? That's 1. You could be minerally or vitamin deficient. And then scar tissue is number 8. And there are external scars on the body. We're not talking about internal scar tissue. We're talking about external scar tissue. I cannot tell you how many women came into my practice who had thyroid dysfunction, hypothyroidism, or even hyperthyroidism, GI symptoms, inability to control or manage weight, period, who have started developing dementia and memory or brain fog issues, who only had all of that started, and it was being sustained as a result of a midline scar from a C-section, or when they tore giving birth to a child. That's called a perennial tear, or an episiotomy, where they cut you while you're giving birth. These scars along the midline are the most problematic for all female reproductive issues. And people would figure it out while I would talk to them during their interviews and my practice or consultations. As I would go through their history, all of a sudden it would click for them that, holy crap, it was after X pregnancy. And you've heard women do this. They'll go like this: man, I always felt great. I was healthy. I was never sick. I was always thin, could always manage my weight, until that kid came along. And that kid could be like number 2 of 4. They're like, everything happened after that one. And when you go to look at it, you go, well, what's different? They think something happened during the pregnancy. And I would just look at them and go, well, tell me about the birth. Was it vaginal? Did you have a C-section? What was it? And very soon and very quickly, you could identify that it was an external scar that's actually influencing the inability of an acupuncture meridian, which is a flow of energy inside the skin, to actually nourish the organs underneath. and the thyroid's on the midline, your gut's on the midline, your heart's on the midline. These women could complain of arrhythmias and palpitations and fatigue. Oh, all you had to do is actually treat the scar using wheat germ oil, which is a really, really amazing compilation and concentration of vitamin E oil. We would use lasers to work on those scars, and within 4 to 6 weeks, you could remove, I'm not kidding, we saw fibromyalgia disappear after 25 years, just working on a perennial tear after a actual birth 25 years earlier. And within 2 to 3 weeks, all symptoms gone, debility gone, disability all removed, everything. It's phenomenal, but you have to have a holistic approach is what we call it. Look at the body as a whole.
Never heard this before. This is news to me for sure right now. Yeah, for sure.
Look at the body as a whole and go, well, what
So does acupuncture help those people?
Yeah, acupuncture does help them, but if you don't fix the scar actually behaves like a capacitor. That electricity, it's actually energy. The electrical energy is running up the midline of your body, and it goes for all 12 major meridians in the body. If there's a scar anywhere on your body, external, and it actually crosses an acupuncture meridian, the energy in that meridian will actually go inside the scar, fill up in the scar, and not travel up to the other parts of the body it's supposed to go to. So if you don't fix the scar, you will actually get the energy built up in the scars, and as the scar tissue builds up in energy, it will release it all at once. And then you'll get these flares of pain symptoms all throughout your body. You hear it with rheumatoid arthritis, fibromyalgia, gout, lupus. They'll have these flare moments. There's almost always a scar related to all of it.
Yeah, and a lot of people, after like a simple hernia operation in men, sometimes they'll have this chronic pain syndrome afterwards too.
Yeah. Oh, so for sure. So these are the most common scars we had deals with. I didn't know this show was going to go there. Your C-section scar.
No, I didn't either, man.
C-section scar, perennial tears, or episiotomy scars for females, and the gallbladder scars.
What about people? Yeah, like what about now when they're doing the punctures, like the smaller punctures rather than the big incisions? Does that make a difference?
Oh, we've had severe hypothyroidism occur in children and teenagers and adults when they just got a belly button piercing, but they didn't know it was related. And the moment we took it out, like seriously, they would be in my office. Now, if we figured out that's what it was, we would ask them to take it out. And within 24 hours or even in the visit, I'm not kidding. We had one lady, she had back pain from the base of her skull all the way to her tailbone for a year. It was just that belly button piercing. When we took it out, all the pain disappeared in the office. So there's just this relationship to the midline with what's called the conception vessel. There's an acupuncture meridian that runs up the front of your body, and then it connects to what's called the governing vessel right here. It goes over your head and all the way down your spine, and it makes a big circle all day long. And the more you cut along that midline, even heart surgeries, right, along the midline, oh, these people have problems galore.
So do things like grounding, does that seem to help with these meridians and things like that?
Yeah, it absolutely can.
Yeah, that's so intriguing. See, these are things we never talk about, and you go, don't get outside, relax a little bit, chill out a little bit.
I had to learn this from people over a 20-year period, trying to figure out what all can be causing symptoms, because not every patient would respond to chiropractic. Not every patient would respond to a medication. Not every patient would respond to acupuncture. You better have a toolkit of a whole bunch of things, as many as possible. In my mind, it was, how can I help you the most? And if you haven't been able to tell, if you've been following me at all, which you said you have,
yeah,
I've been doing the same thing around COVID. It's like, all right, I'm going to make sure everyone knows that the Remdesivir drug is the most dangerous thing anybody can be exposed to in American hospitals. And then the next step was to make sure everyone avoided the hospitals. Then it was, even if you're in a hospital, how am I going to save you? So we created patient advocacy teams. So I have this whole resource on my site. I'm trying to save people around the world. This is not a joke. And then we got attorneys to write.
I've seen it. Yeah, I've seen it. I know you got Renz, you got all these attorneys and people
writing. Yeah, we got Kelly Sorrell writing forms for us that are medical directive to physicians forms for hospitalized patients. You better have it before you go. The hospitals are being bought by our federal government and by the Medicare system. They're incentivizing them to poison you to death with Remdesivir, inventing you. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, so that's what people don't realize. I mean, there's a lot of stuff, Dr. McCullough has been talking about it, and the other doctors are talking about, if you get COVID, and I've seen it personally. I've seen it. That's why I sat back and said, I had a guy had a traumatic fall, hit his head, and he called me from the hospital. So they saved my life here. They gave me Remdesivir in the hospital, asymptomatic, 72 years old, no cough, no fever, no nothing. They swab his nose after a mechanical fall of a face laceration, and admission diagnosis was COVID. And I said, were you sick and coughing? Is that why you fell? He said, no, I just fell. And then they found it, luckily. And I was like, Really? That's crazy. And then they let him go the same day. They didn't give him any precautions at home, nothing. They just, oh yeah, go home after they fix his face laceration. But that's unbelievable. So they got paid an extra money for having that diagnosis on there. But that's what when we're talking about now. Finally, after 2 years, with you get admitted with it or because of it. There's a difference, right? Anyone who has herpes is like you get in a car accident. They don't say, well, herpes is was causing the car accident, unless you were itching or something and missed the turnoff. So I think it's these kind of things that people just don't realize. And when we started questioning the PCR testing and the accuracy and these 40 cycles, and you say, look, we have to know the real numbers. We're real doctors here, and this is a real thing. But the problem is whenever you question anything, you're anti this, anti that, you're anti-science. We go, here's what the science and here's what our clinical experience is showing us. And it's frustrating because I know guys like you have been talking about vitamin D3 and zinc and all these things that we can do that aren't going to hurt you, that improve your chances of survival. As a matter of fact, Tro, my partner on the low carb podcast, was telling me about this kid who came in a year ago and had a young guy and obese and metabolically sick. They got his metabolic health right, and during this process of getting his metabolic, I think his vitamin D level without supplementation went from like 12 or 14 to 100. Just getting his metabolic health right. So you say, gosh, and it's the metabolically sick who are dying in the hospital. We said this 2 years ago, and everyone said these guys are crazy. They have no idea. Now they're saying, oh yeah, guess what? It looks like they were right 2 years ago. How many people died as a result of not focusing on that for the last 2 years?
Yeah, and if you guys can't acknowledge the possibility that you're being lied to and deceived, you are. Can I share something with your audience real quick?
Yeah, absolutely, man. And this is the Bryan with the Y. He spells it wrong.
That's
I'm
right.
the Bryan with the I.
I'll blame that on my mom and dad. They gave me that spelling.
My in-laws put a Y on my name for a long time, so I shared your name for a little while there when I first got married. But I think I'm back to the I now.
That's awesome. All right, so I'm gonna, if they're gonna see this on the screen, I want to just show that this is FDA.gov.
FDA.gov. I'm seeing it.
Yeah,
so for people who are listening.
Yep, for those of you listening, and the question on the FDA.gov's website is this: do COVID-19 tests check for the Omicron, Delta, and other variants? Now, this is as of today, FDA.gov. Okay, all right, ready? Do COVID-19 tests check for the Omicron, Delta, and other variants? And now it says currently. Currently would be right now. Currently, COVID-19 tests are designed and authorized to check broadly for the SARS-CoV-2 virus and not for specific variants. Okay, so I have a question for you, Dr. Bryan, and for your audience. Can you explain to me and the audiences how it is that CNN, Fox, New York Times, Washington Post, how can they publish that the Omicron variant is now spreading throughout America and all the states, even more than Delta? How could they even talk about Delta? There's not even a current test, the FDA says, that even determines that there's a variant of SARS-CoV-2. How are they actually knowing and publicizing that there is actual variants spreading throughout the United States and around the world when the FDA currently says there's no test to determine that?
Oh, it's probably that they probably store it in the same place where it says where it's FDA approved to check asymptomatic people. Yeah, it's probably in the same place because there's not one.
Yeah, let me ask you, medical doctor, Dr. Bryan.
Man, I didn't know I was getting a question. I'm on the Ardis show now.
How often had you learned that a disease could be diagnosed in someone who is asymptomatic, or that those asymptomatic people were a threat to other people? Did you ever have that in your training?
Never. The only time it was a question was the same gentleman who you mentioned earlier, who said that we're not sure about AIDS. It could be if you're close to these people, you could catch it from them possibly, right? That's what they were saying back then, just being in the same room. And so you had all these people get ostracized from society because everyone was afraid of them because they had HIV. At the same time, we had the same problem with Bactrim. We couldn't get it and this is back in the year 1999 when I was at USC. We had trouble getting Bactrim for these people with PCP pneumonia. Guess what? We're seeing PCP pneumonia now again. Patricia Lee, who I trained with at USC, she reached out to me. She was the whistleblower who came forward with Dr. Siri of what she was seeing in the hospital. And she said, Bryan, when's the last time you saw PCP pneumonia? We haven't talked for 20 years, by the way. And I said, PCP, I'm not a hospitalist, but I've been seeing it since I was at USC with full-blown AIDS. She goes, I'm seeing it with people without AIDS post-vax. I'm seeing it. And I have to report. She's reported to the FDA, but they never got back to her. Now she wrote another letter. She's trying to say, look, I'm seeing these immunodeficiency syndromes, and I'm seeing clots, and I'm seeing all this stuff But after she came forward, a lot of other docs came forward, but it's such a hard time because you can't really talk about this stuff. You know, what we're seeing and we can't talk about it is very frustrating because we can save lives if we say, well, maybe if you draw back when you're giving the injection, maybe if you don't work out for a day or two, you know, whatever it is, we have to figure out how to make it as safe for people as possible. If we just turn our head and say it's not happening when it is, we're putting a lot of people's lives at danger.
Yeah, well, the people that are actually doing it are putting their livelihood in danger, and I love them for it. So Dr. Ryan Cole, for example, out of Idaho, the pathologist, he simply came out and had a meeting at the state capitol building in Idaho early on and was like, look, this isn't a viral pandemic. This is a vitamin D deficiency. Everyone should just be taking vitamin D. This is what's going on, and it will help protect you. He's been slandered galore. This guy now is being threatened by his own medical board to have his license taken away in Idaho and multiple states around Idaho because under the microscope, he can see micro blood clotting occurring in tissues around the vaccinated people's bodies that he's never seen before, and he's reporting it. He's got a concern of micro blood clotting that is in teenagers and young adults that was never persistent before, and now his license and livelihood is being threatened. Because
Dr. Peter McCullough, the same.
People. Yeah, Dr. McCullough being sued by the hospital or healthcare system that he actually works for, has an office in their buildings. They want to say
Brian Tyson here. You know, Brian Tyson here in town. I don't know if you know about Brian Tyson, but he's
Brian Tyson, yes.
Yeah, I mean, treats over 7,000 patients with 5 deaths, right? And so he's having that. No one's calling him and say, "What are you doing?" Either he's the luckiest SOB on earth, or he knows what he's doing, right? He has clinical experience and he's researched. He goes, I didn't pull this out of thin air. Yeah, this is based on research that was done against SARS back in the day, talking about hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin. So risk versus benefit.
Or what about Zev Zelenko, right? That guy was threatened by the New York State Board. He'd already cured 10,000 people using hydroxychloroquine, zinc, and other things early on in the pandemic. But he's actually moved from New York.
Dr. Gold, I saw you interviewed her. I mean, all these people, and believe me, when this all started, I sat back and thought, why are these guys taking such a strong stance? And why is it that New England Journal of Medicine, all these other journals are publishing falsified data and they retract it quietly? And how is it that we're not talking about PCR? How come we don't have some of the leaders debate it openly? Let's talk about it. Like go on Joe Rogan. I would love to see Fauci on Joe Rogan. I saw someone just tweet that yesterday. I would love to see that. Right? Awesome. Malone went on there. All these people, and Rogan's he's trying to bring attention because no one can get a platform, and that's why for you, I wanted to make sure we had a platform. And really, because I knew we'd get off course here a little bit. 2 Bryans together is never good, but I really want to talk about the parasite craziness that you talk about, right? So I'm on the treadmill jogging. I'm listening to you on a podcast, and I don't know if you remember the conversation, but you were talking. They said, let's talk about parasites. You're like, oh yeah, like 70% of people in America have parasites. And I was like, oh, that's weird. And then you start talking to them, and you go, well, this symptom, all this stuff you go through. And I was like, oh, you know what? I had a severe mold allergy. And I've traveled through the third world. I've been to Vietnam, El Salvador. My doctor, no one's ever talked to me about, hey, maybe you got a parasite, Bryan. Maybe that's contributing. So I'll tell you the crazy part of it. I go, that's interesting. Parasitetesting.com. I'll send my stool off and I'll just see. And then, I've had eczema for a little while and I've changed my diet. I've made a lot of lifestyle changes, and some things just don't go away. So I go, could be a parasite. So I send off the stool. I go, wow, I'm waiting. This medicine with the name I that I probably can't say the whole thing or I'll get kicked off out of the world. But so I said, I'm waiting for this to come back. And I happen to have some sitting here. And I think I probably have parasites based on my symptoms. I'll take one. So I take one, go to bed 9:30 at night, wake up at 1:30 in the morning, had all the symptoms that I haven't had for a while since I had a huge mold exposure at my old office. Since I've left there, I have minimal little tiny stuff. Anyways, take ivermectin, go to bed, wake up at 1:30 in the morning. My eye is swollen shut. My lip is huge. I got hives. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm allergic to ivermectin. It's got to be. So I start looking up ivermectin allergy. I'm like, it's not that. So the next day I happen to be going to my chiropractor. I go, you're not going to believe. I happen to have prednisone. So I took it and I could work the next day because I had taken prednisone for 2 years when I was at my old place because I would get hives whenever I was working. When I went away to mission trips in the middle of the jungle, it went away. I'm like, that's weird. I'm eating the same stuff. And I never put 2 and 2 together. But anyways, go to my chiropractor the next day and I said, hey, listen what happened to me. And I told her and she goes, oh, you had parasite die-off syndrome. I'm like, what? She goes, yeah, you took ivermectin right away. You didn't detox. I was like, what do you mean? So then I saw another doc who works with missionaries and he said the same thing. He goes, oh yeah, you probably had parasite die. I was like, oh, that's weird. So anyways, 2 days later, I go, I wonder. So I took another dose, and no reaction, no reaction, no reaction. I've taken it several times. I'm like, it's not a drug allergy. So tell me, doc, what the heck is going on?
All right. So great job and great story. That's awesome. I actually found in my own practice, 77% of all patients that had autoimmune diseases actually had parasites. And if you actually cleared the parasites, all their autoimmune diseases disappeared, all of them. And it took like 3 to 6 months total. And then you didn't have to treat them anymore. You didn't have to give them any medication anymore. Didn't have to give them any herbs anymore. You just resolved the issue. So there are 4 major types of parasites that the human body deals with. And that is tapeworms, which are the long worms, roundworms, which are the nematodes. Nematodes are like heartworms in dogs and cats that you hear about. That, by the way, do transfer from every dog and cat to their owners. So
that's as a matter of fact, you were talking about that. You said you were talking to him, housed, and you go, by the way, it's about 100% chance you have parasites. He starts laughing, and he said by looking at me, he said, no, that dog sitting behind you, is that your dog? Yeah. Okay, then that's right. We got it. It's crazy because we don't think about those things in the States.
Yeah, let's give Brandon House a shout. Give Lindell TV a shout. Delta is Brandon House's dog. That dog loves Brandon so much they even sleep together every night for sure. He's a
hardworking guy for sure, no doubt about that.
Brandon House has parasites. The world needs to know that. That's okay. We can still love him. And
did he ever get this test? Do you know if he got? Because you said get your stuff and we'll talk about it on the air.
Yep. So I was on his show again last week, and at that point he still had not gotten the test.
Oh, geez, I went right away, man. I'm gonna see. I'm curious. I'll see either it's crazy or it's not.
Yep, I'm super excited for you to get yours too. So parasites and the die-off. When you said you took the ivermectin and that night your eyes swelled shut.
I didn't say ivermectin. I said the I word. I don't know what it was.
Oh, okay.
I'm just joking. I'm just joking with you. All right.
Yeah.
I just happen to have it sitting around.
So when you took it and you had that reaction, I just want you to know the human body. I've really enjoyed this. The reaction the world has had to me speaking out on their behalf and trying to warn them, because they wanted to know more about what I knew about the human body. So there's something I want to explain to everybody. The symptoms that we typically have are a reaction to the human body trying to get rid of something. So if you get a toxin, a poison, an infection inside of your body, typically your symptoms are a reaction to your body trying to get rid of something. So just think of it this way. You eat something that's poisonous or has poison or rot in it or has viruses in it, you'll actually swallow the food. Your stomach will pick up on the fact that this is poison or not good for you, and you'll throw it up. The body knows to get rid of it. Throwing up is a symptom, but it doesn't mean you're sick. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with you or you have a disease. You are throwing up because your body wants to get rid of something. If it gets past your stomach and gets into your large intestine or small intestine, you'll get diarrhea. Not because you have IBS-D, if you're having chronic diarrhea. What if you're just exposed to parasites, viruses, bacteria, fungi that's in your body and your body's constantly trying to eliminate it? The symptoms tell you something is wrong. When you took the I word, when you took that drug is actually an anti-parasitic drug. The only way the human body gets rid of parasites is one of 4 ways in a male, 1 in 5 ways in a female. Your body, Dr. Bryan, is going to go like this. It's either going to poop out the dying parasite in the form of diarrhea, or it's going to pee it out, and you're going to actually see worms come out of your penis as you pee it out, or you're going to actually sweat it out of your skin and develop hives, or you're going to cough it up in the form of mucus or actual worms. We have tons of patients who would cough up the worms out of their heart and lungs, right out of their mouth, and pull them out for years. So this is the way the human body gets rid of infections, all of them: bacteria, viruses, funguses, and parasites. Parasites, the large worm parasites, are a little more cosmetically and aesthetically gross because you see the worm. That's the only difference. But you have microscopic parasites like protozoa and flukes. Protozoa in America is the most common type of parasite all Americans get. And they get it from water. They get it from their pets, drinking water. So if you're not drinking reverse osmosis filtered water, the likelihood that protozoa parasites and their eggs are in there, they're probably in there, and you're probably exposed to it. The females actually have a 5th way in which they eliminate all parasites. They'll bleed them out through their menstrual cycle. And I just want everybody to know, when people would come into my office, for example, you just have to think, this is how I think differently. When they would come in and say, I have endometriosis, I have chronic constant bleeding, The medical professionals have already told this patient that they need to either have some kind of ablation done inside their uterus, or they've already done that, where they take scalding hot water and they cauterize it inside of your uterus so it can't bleed anymore, or they rip out your organs. That's the solution. Or we're going to just rip it out. Well, the truth is the uterine lining is where a female has an egg implant into the wall of the uterus to help develop a baby. So if there's anything toxic or infectious inside your bloodstream or inside your uterus, it's going to slough it out and bleed it straight out of the body. So if someone had endometriosis and came into my clinic, never did I think, oh, we just need to cut out that organ, something's wrong with it. No, my brain would go like this. Man, your body's doing exactly what it's supposed to. What is it having a hard time getting rid of? Because it's not able to bleed it all out, because it's constantly trying to bleed it out. So then I would start looking for, in the body, are there metals, toxins like chemicals? Is there infections inside the body? The body's constantly trying to shed or get rid of. And then we would figure it out through all kinds of testing. And then we would start treating them to get rid of those infections in other ways, like get their body to poop it out, pee it out, sweat it out, cough it out. And then all their bleeding would stop. It's miraculous. But the body is phenomenal in what it does. So, Bryan, if you just happened to have a uterus when you took that eye drug the other day, you could have not only had hives and a swollen eyeball, you actually could have started spotting or having some menstrual bleeding. And I would tell every patient when they came in, even if they were postmenopausal, if they came in and it was a female, and I told them that they had parasites or viruses or bacteria in their body that we were going to treat, I would tell them, you can expect one of these 5 things to happen to you when you walk out of here and start taking this stuff. You're either going to get diarrhea, changes in your stool, because that's the primary way your body gets rid of infections, or you're going to see cloudy urine or frothy urine, like a UTI symptom. You're going to see changes in your urine color. That's, your body could pee out the infection. That's what it does. And then your body could break out in hives and rashes. You just need to call me and tell me. The body's going to try to sweat it out. You know how many people deal with constipation in this country, Bryan? Doc.
It's a huge problem. I know, man. I see it a lot, and I'll tell you, it's a huge problem. And diarrhea is a huge problem too for a lot of people.
So if people are constipated,
irritable bowel syndrome, yep. Colitis, all these things.
Yeah. If people are constipated, I just want to explain this to them. If people are constipated, the body typically removes the majority of all toxins and things the body doesn't want through your bowels. If you are a person who is not pooping every day, and I gave you a solution to a parasite, bacteria, fungi, or virus in your body's going to break out with a rash. You want to know why? The body's going to sweat out the infection right out of the skin because it can't poop it out or pee it out fast enough if you're constipated. So we constantly made sure the bowels were emptying regularly, and then we'd start treating them, and then it would reduce any of the symptoms of the die-off from viruses, bacteria, fungi, and parasites. But parasites are a huge, huge overlooked.
Yeah, I think we just talked about for a couple of days ago. Okay, yeah, if they have these symptoms, if you have Giardia, there's certain ones that we look for. But you turn me on to the parasite testing.com and they could use your code, whatever you use, because I don't have any financial interest in them. But I'll tell you, I think it's an interesting thing with people who are having problem with anxiety, depression, IBS, all these things. We have to look for an underlying cause. And it's embarrassing to say for 18, 20 years now of practice, I never really thought about that. Unless someone was having acute symptoms, you never thought, oh, you have eczema. So I'll tell you, Bryan, this is why I really wanted to talk to you about this, because this is something that I've noticed in my clinical practice. I've had people get the shot, and 2 days later, they've got psoriasis head to toe. They've got eczema. Bleeding irregularities in females it's almost universal. I mean, I see it very, very commonly. I don't want to see, in my patients, I'm not saying in the world, but I'm saying in what I'm seeing. I've seen neurologic problems. I've seen some weird stuff, and it was bothering me. And then after I heard you talking, I thought, could it be? Because the other thing I've seen is a lot of shingles, more shingles in the last 6 months than I've seen in the last 20 years, right, combined. So when you see this, you go, why is that? What's the cause? So is it possible, as a hypothesis, that if I have a parasite infection that I'm trying to keep at bay and my body's fighting it all the time, and all of a sudden I tell my entire immune system to look for COVID alpha, does it forget about the chickenpox virus that's sitting there? Does it forget about the mad cow disease that's sitting there for some people? Does it forget about all these other things that's been fighting for the last 15 or 20 years? And all of a sudden you just unblind to what was happening, what your immune system was doing.
It really could be. That's a great point and a great way to look at that. I will tell you,
because the reason I'm bringing it up, Bryan, is this, doing a lot of work overseas for the last 20 years. I've always used ivermectin for kids that have failure to thrive. They're weak and fragile. And we give them one pill of ivermectin, they're good for a year. Next year I see them and they're healthy and fit and working out and they get their energy and their eczema is better and they're out. And I never put those together that, man, could it be parasites that are giving a lot of people a lot of trouble that we just don't think about? Depression, anxiety, stress. I'm seeing these things. And this is new to me because I just saw you talk a few weeks ago, but I was like, wow, it's worthwhile looking at least.
Yeah, it's definitely worthwhile looking at. So I'm glad you had that experience there on your mission trips, which is phenomenal. But yes, it's a very...
And we didn't just give it to horses over there, by the way. We gave it to real people with real results.
Are you not shocked that the media wants to continue to portray this as a horse drug? Isn't that weird? Like it's got to be so weird and disturbing to medical.
And we know, I mean, everyone knows. You look at the NIH, all these people have listed as one of the greatest drugs ever, and all of a sudden it's terrible for everyone. It's one of those things you have to just look at it logically, and it's controversial, but it's like you look at it and say what's working and what's not, because if it is, that's why. What's crazy about the whole thing is, I test you positive for parasite. What can I treat you with? Ivermectin. But if it's for that indication of parasite. So if you have parasites, so I'm saying, well, maybe I just check my patient if they have an underlying parasite. I have an indication now to treat. And maybe there's other side effects that I would really like to have as a side effect.
Sure. Yeah, they've tried to block hydroxychloroquine, which is an anti-parasitic for malaria. There's try to block ivermectin prescriptions in pharmacies around the country. We've had to have a ton of docs that you would know all their names who have had to converse with me so I can converse to audiences that get the docs to start writing prescriptions for rheumatoid arthritis and Plaquenil instead of HCQ or ivermectin, right? Because they're blocking the access to these medications, which are essential, have been FDA approved, safe and effective for 70 years for HCQ, 20 years for IVM. And so it's just been an unfortunate thing to watch so much deception and corruption go on. And anyway, so I just want to speak a little bit to what you were talking about post-vaccines and the actual post the shots and what you're seeing as a result, even physically, topically. I will let you know this. For patients who, now, based on my history that I just gave on the show, that my intrigue has always been around systemic lupus erythematosus from the beginning. Like, what triggered this in my sister? Lupus, for all those, any of you who know lupus, they will have this thing called a butterfly rash.
A mallet rash, yeah.
It's one of the most common signs or symptoms that designate the final diagnosis for lupus. I just want everybody to know there are millions of Americans, and I know many in your audience know who they are, who develop what is called rosacea, this little red spot on their cheeks, rosacea. And your dermatologist is going to prescribe either an antibiotic cream or a steroid cream topically, or an antibiotic orally to treat rosacea. I just want all of you to know, you've all been lied to. Your dermatologist was lied to. Rosacea is actually the beginning stages of lupus. It is the beginning of the manifestation of the butterfly rash you see in lupus. And I want all of your audience to know, lupus and rosacea are evidence that your spleen has a parasite or bacteria or viral or fungal infection in it. But most of the time, it is a parasite in your spleen. The spleen will also cause reactions to your entire body with a rash and hives and psoriasis. The spleen is the largest lymph node in your body, and all lymph is tied to your sweat glands, which is why you develop symptoms on the skin. So I just want everybody to know, none of you have been made aware that there is actually a connection to the spleen, rosacea, and lupus. None of you have been told that, unless you've been watching my stuff. You should identify and do the parasitetesting.com. They do check for multiple fungi, parasites, all 4 major types of parasites, and the only clinic in North America to do that, or lab. And then they also test for toxic bacteria, fungi, and parasites, and not viruses. They don't check for that, but those 3 they do, and it's a phenomenal review. If you find any of those are present in your body or in your stool, your body does shed these. Remember, I just mentioned your body's always constantly having die off of bacteria, viruses, and funguses and parasites. You can pick up on that in your stool samples. And that's why you submit a stool sample to them. And yes, there is a code that Dr. Omar Aman, the 30-year parasitologist from Egypt, when he saw my podcast, I'd never even talked to him. I did a show. I was just pissed that Anthony Fauci, the NIH, was lying to the world about COVID. And I was pissed about them lying about Remdesivir. So I decided I was just going to create a show and just expose all their lies to you, even though I didn't plan on doing that. I didn't really want to. I was just furious that they were lying to you. So one of the first ones I did was a whole hour-long show on my own little Dr. Ardis show. I decided to title it, "You Don't Have IBS, You Don't Have Crohn's Disease, You Don't Have ulcerative colitis, You Don't have celiac disease, You Don't even have food allergies. You have blank." And this was just a show I did. And I didn't really have a very big audience at the time. I was just trying to get out information people could use and apply to their lives. That thing has gone like wildfire around the world. So,
and you've also interviewed him twice, Dr. Amin.
I've had Dr. Omar Amin twice. Yeah. Oh, Dr. Amin reached out to me because someone sent him my interview. Because on my actual show, I just put up PCI's website. I got this on the site. He actually explains what are the most common signs and symptoms that you have parasites, which includes all the digestive concerns of all of those conditions I listed at the title of the show. And then I showed how to buy the kits. I had never talked to him. I just said, this is the kit you're going to want to get. The reports will come in 2 to 3 weeks. I had used these for years, but never talked to him. He called me and then wanted to know, is it okay if I like incentivize your audience with a discount or something? I'll give you a code if you're going to continue to promote my stuff. And I was like, will you just come on my show and do an interview? I would like to just interview this. This guy has identified, I don't know anyone else that's done this. He's identified 17 different parasites no one ever even knew existed.
I know, it's incredible.
It's incredible.
It's incredible. It's like stuff that is living and you don't even think about it. It's like one of my pages, like, I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to know. It freaks me out to even think about it. Like, it's funny because there's something like in Western medicine we don't talk about. So yeah, there's so much I want to pick your brain about with functional medicine stuff, cortisol levels, and stress, and all this.
Let me tell you something else that Omar Amin was shocked by in my podcast. In the first one I did, this parasitologist goes, Dr. Ardis, you said in your practice you have seen and you believe that most of the masses and tumors that are being called cancers, that they're actually parasitic egg sacs. And I said, that's what I found. Like 80% of the time, they weren't even cancer. Now, if I treated them for parasites, all naturally, their masses all disappeared, even ones in their breast. The ones in the breast were almost always parasites. Super easy to clear up. And he goes, no one's ever asked me about that, brought that up to me. I just couldn't believe you brought that up in your show. So I just wanted to know, would you like me to give you some data on that so you could speak on it? And I was like, oh, yes. So he sends me all this research from parasitologists around the world. And I have to give this to your audience because I think it's phenomenal. How many people in America are diagnosed each year with colon cancer? Colon cancer is a huge problem. Do you know I have evidence now and data that 40% of all American diagnosed colon cancers are actually parasites and not cancer at all? Do you know that the Rocky Mountain Lab in Colorado in 2016, they took biopsies, or they actually did biopsies and analysis of the brains of 10 MS patients and CSF fluids from samples of people who died from multiple sclerosis. And they wanted to dissect the brains and evaluate their cerebral spinal fluid of these 10 MS patients. 100% of them had 2 and 3 inch long worms swimming in their cerebral spinal fluid. And every single one of them had 2 and 3 inch long worms burrowing holes in the brains of the MS patients, which is the lesions the neurologists are seeing on the CT and MRI scans of an MS patient. And have you seen or heard anything reported on this since 2016? I didn't even know about it.
I heard you talking about it. I never heard that in my life. And I looked it up. I was like, holy cow, this is unbelievable. I mean, that's what I mean. When you start looking at these things, you go, how can it be unbelievable if people don't put it on the news and say, this is a big deal? Like, we should look at it at least, like causation, who knows? Like, you know, I mean, it's these things. Because I was thinking about this. I was just reading something about it, toxoplasmosis gondii. Yes. And causing mental problem. I was thinking, oh, all these people, they say, oh, the crazy cat lady down the street is like, well, is it cause or effect? Yes. Is it possible that that's right. Why? Like, you know, I mean, some of those things you look, you go, is it possible? Maybe check for it and see if you got it. If you don't, then you're just a nutty person. That's okay. But yeah, there's so much of that. Speaking of nutty stuff, part of the other reason I did this podcast is faith. People say, well, if you have faith, then you can't be a doctor. Like they're mutually exclusive. You're anti-science if you have faith. And, you know, like when you say you hear God speaking, there's times when, like me leaving my old practice, the Lord was like, Bryan, time to go. You need to do this. He opens up doors. Like speaking with you is a door I was even knocking on because I just sent it out. And your staff is awesome. Christina was really awesome at getting you hooked up and connected with me and all that kind of stuff. She's been very nice at saying, hey, who do you want on your podcast to talk to, right? And so that's how it should be. We could trade guests and get people a platform.
Yes.
But anyways, I got distracted. What point was I making, Brian? You're supposed to keep me on track, man.
Well, I want you to know there has been a very huge, grateful thing I've noticed and recognized that I've loved throughout this whole thing. You want to talk about faith? I want to just give a shout out to the fact that one of the things that has happened as a result of COVID, I'll blame it on COVID, not the virus, on COVID. One thing that's been miraculous to me is the coming together of all kinds of different healthcare professionals, attorneys, scientists who all want to collaborate together to become one voice of reason for the whole world. It's been a phenomenal experience, actually. I mean, just last week, 2 weeks ago, in our home, we had Mickey Willis, who was the film director for the Plandemic documentary with Judy Mikovits. We had Mel K was there. We've had Doug Billings was there. I mean, Dr. David Martin was in our home with Peter McCullough and his wife. And I mean, they're all there. Everybody's there, all in our home, just hanging out with us here in Dallas.
Yeah.
71 of them. If they're named, if they're named in this movement, they were in our home. And I just told them all and had a moment where I just thanked them all for allowing me the opportunity to stand beside them, to stand for humanity. And it's really all I've wanted this whole time. It's been an amazing ride. I actually was just out in the media by myself, just talking about Remdesivir, and it was amazing to watch the medical profession go, hey, can you please join us and continue to convey the information that you have? And it's been incredible to watch the response around the world.
Yeah, and the Lord gave you the time to look at studies and make them public and be bold. And sometimes being, whatever your motivation, if it's anger, frustration, whatever it is, the Lord uses that, I think, sometimes. So tell me about your faith and how that's guided you during this. Like I'm sure you're getting attacked left and right, and you get all kinds of,
Oh man, I've got 3 lawsuits right now coming against me. One from, or that I'm having to deal with legally. We're from the Texas Chiropractic Board. I'm actually retired. It's pretty funny. They're out there trying to, I know they're being contacted by federal health agencies, and they're trying to figure out how they can screw Dr. Ardis or make him look bad. I know that's what they're trying to do, but good luck with that. So I'm not the only one. There's lots of people doing that. It's just amazing what's occurring. But my faith, I'll just tell you right now, I speak my faith at the end of almost every single speaking engagement I do. And I actually say this out loud. All of you in this country who are God-fearing, God-respecting people who believe that God is all-knowing and all-powerful, all of you who are bowing your knee to men who tell you that they created something in a lab that can make God's greatest creation better than he made it, shame on all of you. All of you who pretend that God created and saved for his last and greatest creation on day 6, which is what I believe. He created and saved his greatest for last, which is your body with an immune system to be the temple and the house of your spirit that he also created. Please remember, God didn't screw up. God was perfect in what he created here. I even say this to them, for all of you that don't even believe in God, if you believe in evolution, then you absolutely believe that you and your human body is the most evolved organism on the planet, which means you also believe it has the most evolved and most superior immune system in it to survive everything on this planet. Why are you acting like a man figured out in a lab how to make that evolutionary process and superior being better than what evolution did? It doesn't even make any sense. God did not fail when he created this human body. And he didn't screw up then. He didn't screw up now. Please have more faith in your natural immunity that God created. And there's currently, this is how I usually wrap it up, there's 144 studies compiled right now, conveniently at brownstone.org by Paul Elias Alexander, my buddy, who went to Daystar with me and was all over TV with us. It was fun. But this actual research compilation, it's 144 studies confirming that natural immunity after getting COVID is more robust and longer lasting than the COVID-19 vaccinated immunity. Now, Dr. Bryan, I don't know how many I don't know how many studies you need to confirm that God's.
I think it's actually over 150 now. Last I checked, man, it keeps
last I
going
saw
up.
was 144. So if it's up 150, it's getting updated all the time.
I have to keep correcting myself on that.
No, that's fine. But anyway, it's over 100. I don't know how many you need. I actually say this. I'll go. I don't know how many you need. For those of you who believe in God, do you really need 3 studies confirming that God was right? Do you really need 4? I mean, do you need more than 1?
Yeah, it's what will convince you, and that's the problem. Is you hear so much stuff, no matter what the data shows, and if you follow the science, and that's to our detriment. That's what we followed. Is you're looking and seeing what does the study show, what does the data show, and that's what's hard when you look at the data and people ask you, and you want to. My job is to discuss the risk and benefit of every treatment, right? I'm not there to say, no, you have to do this. That's why I'm anti-mandate from that standpoint of saying, look, if there's a risk, you can have a bad outcome. And based on VAERS, we know there are bad outcomes. I'm not saying everyone gets a bad outcome. What I'm saying is, look, you as an individual should have the right. If I'm going to go bungee jumping, I want to know the risk and benefit of that. Like, what are my chances of dying? If 4 people died last week bungee jumping, I'm not doing it. If no one's died for 30 years, okay, I'm going to look at that and go, okay, no one's died. Maybe I'll be the first one, but probably not based on what I'm seeing. So anyways, those kind of things, we have to reassess, and we have to assess what we're seeing clinically too. And that's that we have lost the ability, first of all, not to be able to have public debate. So if you say something I don't agree with, okay, we disagree, and I can look at it, I can research it. When I heard you, I said, I'm going to research this guy and make sure he's right. Well, I wouldn't have you on the podcast if I thought you were saying crazy stuff. But each person, and like I always say, this is not a medical, we're not giving you medical advice. Look it up, seek out people who know what the heck they're talking about, people who have clinical experience. If maybe they've seen your condition, it's worthwhile looking at. And to say, no, I'm not even considering, okay, then keep having eczema, keep having stomach problems. But there may be a solution for you. You just got to look. And for me, if it doesn't work, I go to the next thing. But I'm taking this stuff, the freedom cleanse and all that. I'll do it for 30 months and see what happens. I'm good with that. What I got to lose except a couple bucks. So anyways, I think it's one of those things, keeping an open mind. And I appreciate your courage of standing up. It's hard because, the bullets come and the arrows come and the attacks come, and it's hard. But what I'm seeing is more and more people saying, let's look at the data, let's look at the science. And I'm not just going to cower down because, the medical board's after you or whatever. Because when you look at the medical board, and I know people who have lost their license over things before, whenever I saw the medical board stuff come out, it was like they were having, improper sexual contact with their patients. They were doing crazy stuff, taking cocaine in their office. Now it's like, hey, this person said this one day, so we want to get rid of his license. Like, wow, they worked all those years and all that they've dedicated. But I think patients know and people know truth and what they're seeing as someone has character and integrity. So if I'm selling a product right now, they may question me, and that it should be right. But I think it's one of those things where if you're seeing benefit, you want to help as many people as you can. So I appreciate you taking the time to come on. And I know it's a lot of time for you. And I usually don't run an hour and a half, but man, if I got you, I'm going to pick your brain as much as I can. And thank you for the information on the parasites. I think that's some Western medicine we haven't looked at, and we really need to start addressing that more. And just looking at root cause. So I appreciate your approach that way. And really, I'm really sorry for what you went through with your family. That is devastating. And I've seen that too many times where people were isolated and fortunately is you could at least be there for them at that time. A month or two later, you wouldn't be able to even be there to have that discussion.
Like 2 weeks later. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's incredible. So anything else you want to leave my audience with? Please
trust Dr. Bryan's podcast, Dr. Ardis's podcast, Dr. McCullough's One America Out Loud podcast, and his publications. There are people out there trying to save your life, trying to educate you, and stay open to that. Stay open that they're trying to help you, and then do your own research. Always go do your own research.
Yeah, don't take anyone's word for it.
Nope, never.
Quickly, anywhere, go do your research and look and know for yourself. Don't take someone's word for it ever. Not mine, anyone.
And it's okay if we have differences of opinion.
How do people track you down if they want to get to your website and get to your podcast and all that?
Yeah, my website's thedrardisshow.com. It's THEDRARDIS show.com. That's how you get there. Just follow me there.
All right, Doc. God bless. Thanks for joining me, man. I really appreciate your time.
I hope it wasn't an hour and a half of I hope it wasn't too lame for your audience. I hope they got something out of it.
No, I'm telling you, I got something out of it. I think it's these things we have to be able to have an open discussion, and a lot of people don't like it, but I think it's really important. And, let the chips fall as they may.
Where do you live?
San Diego, California.
San Diego. Rocking. All right.
I'm not in the promised land, man.
I won't tell you what Graham Ledger told me SoCal was, but he left. He's in Florida now.
I'm in a little area that's really cool here in San Diego. I love it, but
Congrats.
Who knows, man?
Well, be safe out there.
All right, man. Blessings.
Blessings to you too. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode. We greatly appreciate your support. We would greatly appreciate a positive thumbs up on all of the platforms like iTunes and Spotify or wherever you're listening. And we just thank you for our Patreon supporters. We greatly appreciate your help in getting this message out. We think there's a lot of important information. And hopefully this helps you. Have a great day, and thank you for listening, and thank you for your support.